Welcome to the Not Old Better Show on radio and podcast. The show covering all things health, wellness, culture, and more. The show for all of us who aren't old, we're better. Each week, we'll interview superstars, experts, and ordinary people doing extraordinary things, all related to this wonderful experience of getting better, not older. Now, here's your host, the award-winning Paul Vogelzang.
Thanks, and welcome. Today's episode is brought to you by Hungryroot. Hungryroot, tailored meals for your taste. What happens when the kid reading history books in the deer stand grows up to navigate a missile cruiser through hurricane-force waves and later runs for Congress with a blueprint to rebuild American democracy? Today we will find out. Our guest is Mike Bedenbaugh, a Navy veteran, historic preservationist, and political thinker whose new book, Reviving Our Republic, is part history lesson, part repair manual, and part wake-up call. It's the kind of book that challenges power, respects ordinary citizens, and reminds us that the American experiment is only as strong as our willingness to keep it going. Mike Bedenbaugh grew up in Prosperity, South Carolina, in a town with stories in every brick and bones in every building. He's fought to save Gula homes, moved 800-ton mansions, and believes that history isn't just something we study, it's something we protect. And now he's turning that same energy toward the Republic itself. Mike Bedenbaugh doesn't yell. He doesn't posture. He makes his case like a man who's been in the storm, literally, and come out of it believing that we can fix what's broken if we're willing. Whether you agree with him or not, you'll want to hear him out. So stay with us. This is a different kind of conversation for us, but it's fierce, thoughtful, personal, and one you'll remember. I'm Paul Vogelzang. This is the Not Old Better Show Art of Living interview series on radio and podcast. Join me in welcoming author Mike Bedenbaugh. Mike Bedenbaugh, welcome to the program.
Oh, thank you very much. Great to be here.
It's so nice to be with you, too. We are, of course, going to talk about several things, but mainly we are going to touch on your book, Reviving Our Republic. Thank you for sharing it with me. It's excellent. I just want to start there. I also want to just say thank you so much for signing the book to me. You've generously done that. I always love it when authors sign their work. It's special, and I really appreciate that, Mike. So I have found the book to be excellent. Again, Reviving Our Republic is the name of your book. And I think revival is an interesting term because it really does imply that something is changing, perhaps even something, might be in danger, revival. We're bringing it back perhaps. What do you think we've lost in our republic, in America? Is it corporate money that's just driving us to places we don't want to be? And where do we start to kind of bring it back? So a big question to start off with, Mike.
Well, it is, Paul. And I'd give a big 36,000-foot answer to it first is what has created what we've lost is our success and our consumptive nature. It's like looking at spoiled children who get everything they want without understanding what it takes to create what they have. And so what I see that we've lost is a civic mindedness, a sense that we are part of what is governing us, and not that we've jobbed it out and someone else should be doing it. And as long as someone does their job, we can go on our lives without the responsibility of our part in that. And we treat politics now like it's a sports team that we go to the stadium and watch play and leave, and then whoever wins or loses doesn't matter. You still love them. That's what we've lost, and it's concerning. And also just a sense of me saying the word republic. Mm-hmm. It's amazing how many people see that, and I specifically use it. I mean, we are a republic. We have not lost technically the fact that we elect representatives to govern us like a republic is. but we've lost that sense of understanding what that means. When people say we're a democracy, I think we are a form of democracy, but the point is when you say that, it makes people think all they have to do is vote and then they're done. Republic has a sense of responsibility tied into it and interaction. And that's what I wanted that conversation to be about.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that because I really found that in my research of you, you have this amazing background. I want to touch on it. You really do have this kind of a bigger sense of what America and what the Republic kind of can represent. You and I talked, and I'll personalize this for just a moment. I'm a relatively new grandfather. You're a soon-to-be grandfather. You have this way of thinking about kind of a next generation, but you also have a wonderful sense of humor. As a matter of fact, you kind of self-identify as a class clown. You were at one point a member of the U.S. Navy, a sailor. You're also a preservationist. I really found that to be fascinating, along with this idea of being a political reformer. When did it hit you? Kind of at what point did you kind of say to yourself, I have something to say about America and our future? And why was that now?
I really don't know because I've always been civically minded. I
Hmm.
grew up, being here in the South, I grew up at my grandmother's foot on the front porch, her telling me about her grandfather telling her about the Civil War,
Yeah.
and when
Yeah.
the Yankees came through and destroyed the town's meat reserves, that sort of stuff was communicated to me. Um, I think what really hit me where I knew I had to be responsible for my environment, the community, was I moved back from New York, after the Navy. I lived in New York. We moved back to my grandmother's house in Prosperity, South Carolina, and as I'm
Love that.
walking down the street, I knew that that street used to be lined with giant oak trees, and
Huh.
they had died over the previous 50 years. One giant tree was left, and as I walked, the town had marked it to be cut down, and I'm like, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa,
Yeah.
whoa." So I immediately started getting engaged and I realized I'm responsible for what this is. And that ended up me saving the tree.
Mhm.
It didn't have to be cut down. And I ended up running for town council and getting on town council. So that was kind of the spark to realize, okay, this is one of my jobs too.
Yeah, I love that name, Prosperity, South Carolina. You have this deep love of the South and all of its stories, and they're deep, and you do have this sense of preservationism in terms of its buildings, plus the scars of the South, perhaps. And you talk lovingly about even collecting butterflies at your mother's house from the mimosa tree, along with the other trees there. What is it about the South that is key, I think, to understanding America?
Well, when I had my podcast, I was interviewing, I was talking to folks that you cannot, especially talking to my friends in Europe, you cannot understand the United States without understanding South Carolina.
Mm, okay.
Because South Carolina was the colony that was created specifically just for commerce and to make money. It wasn't these ideas of searching for gold or, all of these things, the Cavalier or freedom of religion, like what you had in Massachusetts with the Puritans. Here it was just about making money, period. And the systems it set up, the different people that came here. I'm descended from German heritage, my name Bedenbaugh. I have also Quakers and other folks in my background, but South Carolina is a very complicated place that went awry I say, I love this state for all its quirks and foibles and all the
Mm.
pain that it initiated and also went through. And you just can't understand the country without knowing the type of battles that this state had dealt with in itself and what it projected out to the rest of the nation.
The book is excellent, and I want to talk to you a little bit about your writing about George Washington, and in particular, his farewell address, because you describe that as being almost a maintenance manual. I love that phrase, Mike Bedenbaugh. You talk that the farewell address although it might be a bit forgotten, no one really seems to talk about it much anymore, but you have, and you talk about it being an important element for our democracy. Why do you think people have ignored it, the farewell address? And what's breaking in our country that we need to fix that we can follow from this maintenance manual?
Well, when I come at things, like I look at an old building and look at the
Mhm.
foundation and understand, because I dealt a lot with old structures that mattered, that had been neglected, and what does it take to revitalize them? So I look through that lens. But first of all, I want to make sure I clear up why I chose Washington. Because
Yeah,
Washington,
please.
to me, is without a doubt, our nation would not exist without that one man. Every other supposed founding father could have lived. If he wouldn't have existed, we would not have the nation we have.
Mhm.
Several things, primarily what he did, and what this is another piece of history most people don't remember, is the Newburgh Conspiracy. After the war, Revolutionary War, the lieutenants were not getting paid, the army wasn't getting paid, and they were about to march on Philadelphia to take back the country and to install Washington, or probably Gates, who wanted to be head of the country, to take control. And Washington stopped it immediately, just through the force of his personality and leadership.
Mm.
And I contend that if you look at every revolution in the world that ever happened where a reactionary group overthrew an existing government, it usually within 10 years ended in a destructive civil war where the revolutionaries destroyed each other before. This country was the only one of significance that never happened, at least until 7 years, when our inevitable civil war happened. He stalled that to allow constitutional governance to take hold. That is very important. So when his words matter to me, and when he stepped down voluntarily after 2 terms, which set the precedence for other presidents until Roosevelt broke it, he sat there and followed up on Franklin's statement that it's a republic if you can keep it, when he walked out of the convention and told the lady what type of government we have. And he sat down and said, okay, here's what I've seen the past 8 years. Here's the concerns that we have with all of these issues, with uh, fake patriotism, entangling alliances. This is what you have to be careful of if you're to keep this republic. And it's been forgotten, again, because we've become so successful, we don't think we have to maintain this stuff anymore. A lot of this stuff that's happening, people think, well, America's always been here, everything will be fine. As we see the past 5 years, we could see things could be lost. So the maintenance manual itself is what we need to maintain our sense of involvement. The most important is the difference between natural persons and artificial personas. That's something that those 18th century men would have never really understood how that could compromise us. And basically, it's a difference between corporations and human beings and individual citizens, and how we need to put a firewall in between one power over the other.
Well, I mentioned corporate money really at the top of our conversation, and I guess that's a good place to kind of jump off. Of course, the title of the book is Reviving a Republic, 95 Theses for the Future of America. Of course, Martin Luther. I thought this was just a nice nod to Martin Luther and his 95 Theses, who famously nailed those to the church door. You're doing kind of some of his same work by pushing these out there. One of your theses says that only people who can vote for a candidate should be able to donate. So it kind of ties in with this idea of corporate funding, but only those people that vote can donate to a campaign. It's such a simple idea. Why isn't it already the law? What is
I
behind
don't
some of this?
I don't know, because when
Mhm.
I ran for Congress, it was one of those things that kind of came to me. If
Mhm.
if speech is if spending money they think is speech, then and it influences campaigns. When I ran, I saw so much money from outside the state flowing in to candidates. And what's happened is the big corporatized parties have colonized other states for their national agendas. And I don't know, Paul, I just thought, you know what? Why don't we just do that? That's just one thing we can do. And of course, I've had attorneys and others tell me, well, then people will just launder money through people and they will give money. And I'm like, well, anything can go wrong. It's about, let's start having a discussion about why we can't do that. Because this is about setting goals. This is about what do we want to achieve? And everybody, when I ran for Congress, I ran as an independent, but I had as many conservatives as liberals coming to the meetings with me, and they all agreed with 80 to 90% of the thesis. And so that tells me there's a common ground here and a sense of common sense that people want to see. And that's the message I'm trying to say. There is stuff we all agree on, and that's what I tried to focus on.
If you're just tuning in, or if your coffee's worn off and you need a reset, my guest today is Mike Bedenbaugh, author of Reviving Our Republic, 95 Theses for the Future of America. We've talked about George Washington, storm-tossed ships, corporate money and politics, and yes, even butterfly collecting. But what ties it all together is this. Mike Bedenbaugh believes everyday people, yes, you, me, we have more power than we think, especially those of us with some miles behind us, some stories under our belt. So grab your notebook or just lean in. The second half of this conversation is where things get even more real. We'll be right back with Mike Bedenbaugh right after this. I mentioned our sponsor today is Hungryroot. I want to set the scene. It's 6:12 p.m. I've just gotten home from walking the dog. I've got a couple of voicemails from my sister, maybe my mom, and of course, there's not much in the fridge, but some mustard, grapes, and one very tired carrot. Plus, as all of you know, I'm a healthy guy, and I make New Year's resolutions just as I've done this year, and I want those to stay on track, especially my health goals. And that little voice kicks in. What's for dinner? That used to be the moment I gave up, poured a bowl of cereal, but that all changed thanks to Hungryroot. Hungryroot is basically your personal nutrition coach and shopper in one. You tell them what you like, your health goals, and what you don't want in your cart, then they take care of the planning and the shopping and deliver it all to your door. Meals, groceries, snacks, even smoothies and sweets. I've been using it for a few months now. The recommendations got smarter every time with personalized advice, and suddenly I'm eating healthier without overthinking it or overspending. I want food that works, whether it's just me or whether it's Gretchen when she gets home from teaching. And I've got a hungry grandchild also underfoot. I want meals that help me feel strong, especially around him, not ones that stress me out. Hungryroot makes that happen. Take advantage of this exclusive offer for a limited time. Get 40% off of your first box, plus get a free item in every box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/NOB and use the code NOB. All of this will be in our show notes. Again, that's hungryroot.com/NOB, code NOB to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. Thanks, everybody. Our guest, of course, is author, historian Mike Bedenbaugh, who's written this wonderful book, Reviving Our Republic, 95 Theses for the Future of America. We'll have links so that our audience can find out more about Mike's work, about Mike's website, his wonderful book, Reviving Our Republic, and all of the things that Mike's got going on. I mentioned your background, which is just impressive, Mike. And again, congratulations on the book. I enjoyed it and want to recommend it highly to those. It's getting great reviews online. I always enjoy reading reviews of books, and I always enjoy in particular reader reviews. And I found this It says, every American citizen should read this book, mentioning reviving our republic. It's thought-provoking, grounded in history, and refreshingly nonpartisan. I think that ties very nicely into just this previous answer of yours. And I want to touch on some of your other deeper experience. You lived in Russia during the fall of the Soviet Union. And I wonder, looking at where both Russia and American are today, do you ever worry we're kind of trading places with one another when it comes to freedom and power? One's going one direction, maybe that's the same.
Yeah, I have to tell you what's happening in Russia and what's going on between us and Russia just breaks my heart. I was there at a moment in 1990. I went there expecting Gorbachev to be overthrown. I knew
Hmm.
enough of Russian history. I knew that would happen. I missed it by 1 year. I was hoping to be there to report to the state paper in Columbia what would happen. But I was surrounded by when you're in a place of so much suppression and to see people so eager to want to talk, to want to experience an American, everybody embraced me. Everybody wanted to talk. The sense of hope that these people had that I lived with. I lived with 4 different families from Moscow to Yalta in the Crimea to Leningrad at the time, now St. Petersburg. And I'm still in touch with some of these people where I talk to them about once a month. And it breaks my heart, the failure of what happened on how we weren't able to take advantage of the relationship and the optimism these people had because it's now gone. And to see great power politics overwhelm possibilities has been probably one of the most tragic things I've seen in the past 50 years. Because where we are now did not have to be, and that's a sad, tragic thing.
I'll personalize this again, just a little bit, Mike Bedenbaugh. My mom taught Head Start school as I was growing up, and your own wife works with children who come from incredibly hard circumstances, just as many of the Head Start kids did that I experienced with my mom's teaching. Many kids don't even, speak English, let alone Spanish, but they speak indigenous languages. And I wonder, how has that shaped you? Because teaching and protecting these kids, I think, is meaningful work, and it kind of resonates with this overall idea of the American dream and the American promise. And I wonder how it's affected you.
It's affected me heavily and
Mhm.
emotionally when I go and visit. So she teaches English as a second language in a public elementary school where they get special funding to help bring these young children, kindergartners, first grade, second grade, to learn English to be able to learn in the public schools. And these children are so filled with hope. The second, third graders are telling me how they look forward to being policemen and firemen and just this optimism and how brilliant some of these children are. But all the criteria is geared to assuming they're speaking Spanish
Mhm.
when many of these young children from Honduras and Guatemala are speaking the old Mayan languages still from the villages where they were.
Mhm. Mhm.
And my wife has done an amazing job of connecting with them and to see the possibility of the future. I see the future of this nation in these young children's eyes of what they want to be. And that's another tragedy that is starting to happen now, where many of these children are now disappearing out of the classroom as their families are taken and kicked back. Um, it's we have a reckoning to how I was talking to someone the other day. We have a reckoning to how we deal with folks. A nation is not defined as much by who it punishes, but who it protects.
Mm.
And and we're on the cusp of our nation. And this is one of the motivations for me writing this book. Our systems has engineered a reactionary political climate that is not seeing the long view. And that was the main reason I wrote the book. These children helped inspire me to write this because they're the ones that's going to inherit what should be a slam dunk on how people can be the best they can be. They can aspire to be whoever they want to be. And I see that in these children's eyes, and that's what I hope our world can benefit from them being the best they can.
That's a lovely sentiment. Thank you. I appreciate you sharing that. I really did get that in reading your book and in researching you a little bit, that you do have a great deal of hope. And I wonder, what is it that keeps you from falling into kind of a cynical state, into cynicism? Because you do have this really strong, powerful hope about today and our future.
I don't know, Paul. It's just something that, I've always had a sense of fire in my belly when I saw something either wrong, but it's also my historical perspective. It's a blessing and a curse because I know history well enough to know nothing is safe from collapse, but I also know the arc of justice can bend. It's painful the way it bends, but I see the hope in these children that are here. I see the hope in right now. I mentioned before we were talking the March for Peace, the Buddhist monks that have left
Mhm, mhm.
Fort Worth and are marching 2,800 miles to Washington, D.C. And these 20 Buddhist monks are walking barefoot through the countryside of the South. And I was in one of the most rural, empty places in South Carolina, the 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 buckle of the Bible Belt and conservative area in South Carolina, and in a town of 3,000 people, there were 1,000 people there to see them, tears in their eyes. It was amazing to see so many people gather together. In Columbia yesterday, 10,000 people follow these folks because
Wow.
they're so hopeful for positive engagement. And that's what gives me hope that this is there, out there in the atmosphere, and people are ready for peace-driven, respectful, faith-based solutions. And I don't mean faith just in religious terms. I mean
Sure.
faith in each other, a civic faith that we can make this work.
Mhm. Yeah, you argue in the book that this idea of faith and renewal can come from us, free citizens, local communities, states, even, that really can bring a diversity, not a single ideology, in a very nonpartisan way. It's very impressive. And so I wonder, what is it that you believe about this idea of diversity and kind of thought dispersion, local decision making, that is a strength and that can really prove to overcome some of these potential uh, uh, threats to the nation, and this decaying and letting things slip away when they
It it
shouldn't.
it's gonna take people realizing that they have to take responsibility for what they're standing in and where they
Mhm.
are, how we need to act, how we need to respond so that we can figure out and navigate how we get to the type of nation that we wanna be.
I think many in my audience would view, currently what's happening as chaotic and potentially destabilizing. And so I wonder what you'd say to them to inject this note of, kind of positivity and hope, because I think there is a lot of concern.
It is, and it should be. Um, and the depth of that concern will get worse until people start changing it and doing something about it. And that's all I say. I don't know how long we're gonna go through this. In my Russian studies, there's a period in Russian studies called the time of troubles, when Ivan the Great, Ivan the Terrible died, he had no heir. There was a civil war called the time of troubles, and the czars came back and they put it back in place, but it was a terrible civil war. I call what we're getting ready to go through is a level of time of troubles as we reassess who we are, how we engage in the world, what does this mean? And I write for the European magazine kind of as an American perspective to
Mhm.
say, we've got to go through some soul searching over here. And it's just going to be part of it. We have to go through the fever to know how we're going to heal. And the sooner we all collectively understand that, the quicker it can be.
You've seen this country, from many perspectives, as a part of the U.S. Navy, a missile cruiser, from the helm of a missile cruiser to kind of some of the halls of local government, and then your work in preservationism, from the steps of a slave dwelling. So lots of different perspectives you have, and I wonder, in all those views, what makes you proudest to be an American today?
You know, I think back at the time when I was born. I was born in the household of an oligarchical white family in South Carolina who had 2 black families living on the farm that had been there for 2 generations as sharecroppers. One of those women walked half a mile to come and feed me and my brother from her home, where it was a hand pump well and an outhouse, to our brand new 1961 ranch house that she came and kept in order.
Hmm.
And from that world to the world now, and she couldn't go into the same hospital that I had to go into. I remember being in a waiting room at the local clinic, and I saw Florence through the door sitting in the black waiting room, and I shouted, "Florence, come in with us." And everybody just, "Shh, Mike, you're not supposed to do that." To live in that and to see where we are now in the South, when I'm sitting down and go in a restaurant and I see a mixed race couple coming in with their child, and just how normal all of that is, and it happens in 50 years. That's incredible. That we still, of course, have a lot of work to do, but to see that type of revolutionary change in a way, it's just amazing, and it makes me so proud that we live in a place where change can be allowed, knowing that there were people on the other side of the veil making that happen and sacrificing for it. We might have not felt it ourselves, but it happened. And once you normalize things, once you take the system away from it, everything's system driven. Once that system of segregation was gone, how normal it became not to have it. It's really incredible. And that gives me hope.
Mike Bedenbaugh, I want to wrap up, ask you some, what I like to call some kind of rapid fire, high energy questions. Just tell us your reaction, perhaps. Give us just a sense of kind of where things stands. First question is, Washington or Lincoln? Who would you rather have dinner with? And what would be the first question that you would ask?
Well, I'd have to say Lincoln,
Yeah.
because I would like to sit down with him and say, if you knew almost 700,000 people would die in the war, would you do anything different?
Wow. Hmm.
That's what I'd love to ask.
That's a good one. All right. So, as a preservationist, what's the favorite building that you've ever saved? Perhaps some of the Gula houses, the Gula Geechee houses, or wished that you could have saved?
The Gullah Geechee house, Francis Jones' house, without a doubt.
Uh-huh.
I went
Mm.
down to the island of Defusky, and I saw these houses that were 100 years old, and the Francis Jones house was lived in by the matriarch of the island. She had died 10 years before I got there, and it was fallen in ruin. And we were able to engineer and get grants and save it. And I'm confident this is not hubris, it's just the fact that I was happened to be circled with a great group of supporters. If we wouldn't have gone there, that house would be gone now. And it's probably one of the most important places we saved on that level, of cultural level.
You have this really wonderful sign off to your work. You say place, purpose, and preservation. I just thought that was so powerful. That's wonderful. So, congratulations. So, question for you: what's one founding principle that we've totally forgotten today?
Responsibility,
Hmm.
just civic responsibility. What one of the things about I'm dealing with when I talk about more federalism and people are afraid of states' rights, I say, South Carolina kind of hurt that concept and abused that concept of states' rights, especially during segregation. But I turn it into states' responsibility. It's about what are we responsible for and how do we ensure that responsibility is given its due. and that's the big thing we've lost.
As a member of the U.S. Navy, we thank you for your service. And I wonder if you'd answer the question for us. What's harder, navigating some of those storms out there on the ocean as a naval officer, those giant waves in the North Atlantic, or today's stormy political conversations that might come up during the holidays?
It has to be the storms. Those political conversations, I enjoy navigating those because I learned how to get a toehold in consensus, and I enjoy that. The storms, that North Atlantic storm where we had 60-foot seas, I kept looking at the captain, and as long as the captain was whistling and tapping his chair, I was fine. So, yeah.
Good. Okay, last question for you, Mike Bedenbaugh. What's one Southern dish that every American should have at least once?
Well, the thing about a Southern dish, it has several food items on it, but to think of one, I have to say grits. Done well with good cream put into it. And, I'm not, a lot of tourists and stuff that come here and go to Charleston, they always think shrimp and grits is the Southern food. I never heard of shrimp being in grits all my life. That's some Chamber of Commerce Charleston restaurant thing. Up here, it's just good old grits with cream and butter in it, and some good broth from the bacon and sausage going in it. So that's it.
Excellent. Mike Bedenbaugh, been our guest today, author of the wonderful book, Reviving Our Republic. Again, just one last review to share with our audience. Mike Bedenbaugh writes with clarity and urgency in a nonpartisan way. You don't have to be a political junkie to understand the problems or the solutions that he lays out. So congrats, Mike Bedenbaugh. Pleasure talking to you. My best to you. And, as you're doing more work along these lines, I'll just say selfishly, we'd love to have you back. This is interesting stuff. I know our audience is going to be fascinated by all of your work, but thank you for it. Congratulations. My best. And we'll talk soon.
I really look forward to it. Thank you very much for having me on.
Thank you, sir. Well, if you weren't fired up before this interview, I bet you are now. A huge thank you to our sponsor today, Hungryroot, as well as a huge thank you to Mike Bedenbaugh for sharing not just his book, Reviving Our Republic, but his memories, his humor, and his challenge to us all. Whether it's preserving a century-old home or reforming a 250-year-old system, Mike reminds us that repair work, real, lasting repair, starts with people who care enough to show up. If you'd like to hear more, visit revivingourrepublic.com. You can find the book on Amazon. We'll have links so that you can find that information. You'll also find links to Mike's YouTube series where he keeps the conversation going with guests who are working for real change from the ground up. And for more conversation like this, head over to notold-better.com to explore our full archive of interviews with voices that matter, authors, veterans, doctors, historians, and ordinary folks doing extraordinary things. We're also on social media at Not Old Better, on Twitter X at Not Old Better, on Instagram. Let us know what you thought of today's show. We love hearing from you. This is a production of NOBS Studios. Thanks for joining us today. Let's be well, be better. Let's talk about better. I'm Paul Vogelzang. Remember to be curious. Join me again next time on the Not Old Better Show on radio and podcast. Thanks, everybody.